And this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of women turn to other forms of spirituality, not organized religion, but things like supernatural beliefs based on the power of women. So feminists are, while they're more likely to also be atheists, they're also way more likely to be spiritual and into things like yoga, Reiki, Zen meditation, paganism, Wicca, all that sort of woo nonsense. And there also is this concept of women's intuition, that women have this separate way of knowing things. They just know. They don't need, scientific method or empirical evidence or like actual ways of knowing things. They just know. And the problem with these, while they do give women some sense of power and empowerment, is that they're bullshit. Women's intuition doesn't exist, and Wicca and paganism and Reiki and Zen meditation, those breathing nicely can calm you down, but it's not because there's some spirit or energy flow out of your chakras. Okay, they're all bullshit. And so the problem is that when women buy into this to replace traditional religion, they're still powerless. They're not actually embracing themselves as a human being. They're trying to turn something else instead of just saying, it's okay that I'm a woman, I don't need to turn to something else to gain this power. So is closing the godless gender gap possible? Can we encourage more women to become atheists? Yes, I think so. And this isn't just me being optimistic, this is data, which you can't see, so I'll try to explain it in words. This was a Barna Group report in August 2011, and what they did is they compared men in 1991 to men in 2011, and then women in 1991 and women in 2011. And when you look at men and women, men are still less religious than women. But across the board, in things like church attendance, Sunday school attendance, volunteering at church, thinking the Bible's totally accurate, and reading the Bible weekly, both men and women are becoming less religious as time goes on. So even though there's still that gap, women are becoming less religious. And so we just need to keep speaking out about atheism and criticizing religion, and eventually women are going to catch up. But there are two first steps that you can do to get out of religion as a woman and help other women get out of religion. And I actually took these steps just from the advice for getting out of an abusive relationship. And I think they totally apply to getting out of religion as well. The first is realizing that there's a problem and that you are worthy of more than what your partner is giving you. Partner in this case being God/religion. I think a lot of the really outspoken new atheists like Dawkins and Hitchens and all people writing books, I think they're doing a good job at this. They really put atheism into the limelight, into the media. There's so many people who didn't even realize atheism was an option, especially women, until atheism started getting media coverage. And so even though some, Dawkins and Hitchens and those kind of like angry atheists, they get the news coverage, even though they rub some people the wrong way, that helps people know that there are atheists out there, that we exist. And two is to confide in a friend or support system. And I think that's what groups like this are great at doing. It's great that we have more and more in-person groups springing up, even if you just want to get a beer together or hear some random American ramble about feminism. It's good to be able to meet other people who are like-minded, because it makes you think that you're not alone. I know when I went to university, at Purdue University, I felt like the only atheist on campus. It was a fairly conservative Christian area. And it wasn't until I decided to start an atheist group, I put like 40 flyers around campus, randomly rented a room for 40 people, and 120 people showed up. They were spilling out into the hallways. We could not physically fit them in the room that I had rented. And it was just shocking to me, because since that support system wasn't already there, I felt alone. But now that that group is there, and it's still there now that I've graduated, people know the second they go to Purdue University that they can go look at the list of clubs and be like, hey, an atheist group, oh my god, I'm not the only person who, well, they probably wouldn't say, oh my god, but I'm not the only person who doesn't believe this stuff. And so they can go and have that support system. But I also think it's important, because a lot of people, they might not have a local group, they might be in the middle of nowhere. I think the internet is a great boon for atheism. There was a study that came out recently looking at millennials, so people under the age of 30, which I fall into that group, that we are rapidly decreasing in our belief in God. When you look at all other generations before us, they're pretty steady in that about 80 to 90% say they never doubt their belief in God. And when you look at millennials, about 10 years ago, we were around 75%, and now we're in the 60s, and it's just plummeting downward. And I think a big part of that is the internet, and that we have this community where every young person knows how to use the internet. We grew up with it our whole lives, basically, and we have this way of connecting with people and connecting with people who have different ideas from us that we might not ever have been exposed to. So things like blogs, make my plug for free thought blogs, I think those provide a lot of communities for people who otherwise wouldn't have it in person. So what next? Again, I talked about this a little, but we need to provide a safe landing space and have communities to replace the old. This is especially important for women, because like I said, if you're leaving a church or a family system that's so religious, you're going to lose a lot of that support system and friends. So you really need a support system in place. And just to illustrate the point of how some people really don't understand how many atheists are out there and how a religious woman might view the world, my first week at Purdue, so when I was 18, I was reading The God Delusion in the laundry room, waiting for my laundry to be done. And at this time I was transitioning from agnostic to atheist because of Richard Dawkins. And I was reading this book, and I look up, and there's this young woman, also a freshman, sitting across from me, just looking at me in horror. And I noticed she has a necklace around her neck with the Virgin Mary. And I'm just like, please don't talk to me, please don't talk to me. I was very not confrontational then. And eventually she speaks up and she's like, oh, what's that book about? And I'm like, oh, atheism, and not believing in God. And she's like, oh, are you an atheist? And I sit there for a second, I'm like, yeah, I think I am. And she just looks at me and she says, totally sincerely, but then how will you ever find a husband? I was blindsided. All things to ask me. But I think that really illustrates how religious women view their religion. It's not just a belief, it's their support system, it's their culture, it's their society. She could not even fathom a world that if she started doubting God, that she would ever love again. That's depressing. You can never love because you don't believe in God. At the time, I had no idea how to respond because I wasn't like into the atheist movement then, so I never really got used to debating people. In retrospect, I wish I would have been like, why should my number one thing in life be to find a husband? I'm here at college, you're asking me about getting married, I'm 18, Jesus. But the thing I said to her, because I had just read this passage of the book, I'm like, you realize there are more atheists in the United States than Jews or Muslims or Hindus, and Jews and Muslims and Hindus find other Jews and Muslims and Hindus to marry, and she just looked at me in more horror, like, you're that many atheists?
Oh no, they're talking to these babies.
Oh, we're reading Atheist Quiverful. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Another thing we need to do is to be proactive. We need to break the cycle. There's a problem with our movement, and it's a problem because it's self-perpetuating. We have few visible women. Even when I'm giving talks, the first people I think of are Dawkins and Hitchens, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And because there are few visible women, that leads to less women feeling welcome a lot. If you go to an event and you show up and you're the only woman in a room out of 50 guys, it makes you wonder why. The true reason could just be that you're the only one interested, but you start wondering, like, did they scare all the other ones away? Is there something I don't know? And it just makes you feel uncomfortable because you start wondering, why am I the only woman in the room? And if you start feeling uncomfortable going to conferences or events, there are less women active in the movement and doing stuff, and that leads to less women actually deserving visibility then there are fewer women being visible. So we have to be really proactive in making sure that women aren't just overlooked in the movement when they are deserving of visibility. So one way to do this is to encourage women to take leadership positions. For example, ladies, volunteer to help run events. If you come up with your own idea, if you just want to help set something up or introduce a speaker, anything helps. Give a presentation to your own group. Is there a specific topic that you're particularly interested in, you want to talk about? Try doing that. And also run for officer positions. Again, if you have more women leaders, more women are likely to come to your meetings. And I saw this firsthand when I ran my group at Purdue. First couple of years, it was me and 2 guys as the officers. My final year, it was all 3 women, and our women membership just skyrocketed. And then when I graduated, it was all 3 guys as officer, and all the women left the group. They were basically just scared away, because it was not only women being visible, but a lot of the guys weren't realizing when situations became uncomfortable for women. They didn't realize when guys were just hitting on the only woman in the room and basically scaring her off. Where in that case, when I was president, I could see that was happening and try to diffuse the situation because I was aware that happens to women, but the guys were just not really aware of it. So I don't think it was out of malice. I just think, women have different experiences than men, and some men aren't always aware of what goes on. Also consider women's interests when you're getting speakers to give talks. And I don't mean to make everything pink and frilly. This is Richard Dawkins' The Prettiest Show on Earth. Pink butterflies. Oh, it's not pink on the screen, but it's bright pink on my screen. I agree, The Prettiest Show on Earth, let's not lie. But don't forget the humanities. I think atheist groups have this habit of being super science heavy. And I'm not saying that women aren't into science. I'm a scientist, I'm a woman. But the fact is that science is still male heavy. And so when you're drawing from a male heavy population, you're just going to skew your numbers to be male heavy in general too. So don't forget that, talk about something other than science every once in a while. Talk about ethics, talk about families and religion, talk about feminism. And identify shared interests. If there is a local women's group or GLBT group and they're fighting some stupid religious law, join in, join forces. You might not agree about everything, but you can be allies for a while for that topic. And we also need to solve our own problems. There's been a lot of stuff floating around the blogosphere lately that's just kind of depressed me about how people treat women's issues. A little while ago, there's a video blogger called Amazing Atheists, who just went crazy on Reddit with rape threats towards this person who disagreed with them. It was really vile and graphic. And most people spoke out about him, but there were also a lot of people who were just like, hey, he's funny and he's just telling a joke and that's just how he is. He's just a crass guy. And it's like, no, that was inappropriate. I'm not even gonna repeat what he said. It wasn't just like, you should get raped. It was super graphic. In our atheism on Reddit, there was a 16-year-old girl who posted a picture of herself with a Carl Sagan book being like, look what I got for Christmas, or for my birthday, I don't remember what holiday it was. And half the thread, if not just about her looks, was basically how they would like to stick her penis in her and making jokes about how blood is lubricant. It was disgusting. These are atheists making these jokes. We need to stand up to these people. And it's not just random people on the internet. There are some of our idols and famous atheist speakers who occasionally say things that are not so right. I'll say 2 words, Dear Muslima. If you don't know what I'm talking about, ask me later. We need to be able to say like, hey, I disagree with what you're saying, and I'm not just going to let it slide because you're super famous or because you're my idol. We need to be able to speak out against these people. And one of the more recent problems was, it's amazing how the benign things really get people upset. I actually sparked this latest controversy because I have a penchant of doing that accidentally, I suppose. I just say things not thinking they're going to be controversial, and then boom, the internet explodes. That I said that it was known that there were some male speakers who were acting inappropriately towards women at conferences, and that women knew about this and would tell other women to avoid these people, and felt like there's basically nothing they could do about it because there was no system in place to report it, and they felt no one would listen to them. And so one of the suggestions that came out of this was, hey, let's start putting anti-harassment policies at our conference. Other conferences do this all the time. Workplaces have it. It's pretty simple. We wouldn't have to come up with it new. Like, we just go to the website and copy and paste their anti-harassment policy saying, don't croak women in the hallways and don't proposition them like when they're giving a talk, stuff like that. And the internet went crazy. They saw this as feminists trying to ban men from ever having sex ever again, which is not what it's about. It's from banning non-consensual sexual interactions. And people went crazy. I mean, Ophelia Benson was one of the bloggers who was speaking out about this the most. I actually didn't really, I just kind of lit the spark and I ran away from the conversation because I was coming here, I was busy. And she had such vile remarks that she had to, other day, pull out of speaking at the Amazing meeting in Las Vegas because she was getting threats from people in emails saying basically to not go to their conference because they don't want someone like her there. She wants anti-harassment policies in place. It's ridiculous. And I feel like I need to say, obviously not all atheists are like this. I think the majority atheists are fine. I see many of you looking in horror as I explain this, so I can tell you're good people. And I know I have tons of atheist friends who are great. I never am going to leave, I'm not going to leave the atheist community. I think what we're doing is great work. We just need to be really proactive about solving our own problem before we go say, hey, look how bad religion is about sexism, and then pretend that we don't have a problem as well. So that goes back to the point about speaking up. This is privilege denying atheist dude. Too bad there aren't more women atheists in here. I think it's because women are more rational than us men. And that's Dave Silverman giving his what the fuck face. I can't really do it. Dave has a special ability to do that. It's good to have someone on your side because it gets really old defending yourself constantly, and it makes it seem like it's an issue that affects everyone instead of just a special women's issue. So it's a human rights issue to be treated equally. I know Greta Christina, fabulous blogger friend of mine, she says this is how she feels about how the atheist movement treats GLBT issues, and that when someone makes a homophobic comment on a blog post, they get eviscerated, and not by gay people, but by straight allies. All the straight allies rush in and just tear that person to threads. And we're starting to get there with feminism. When I first started doing this talk or before it, if I made a post about some women's rights issue that I thought was blatantly obvious why it was a problem, I get so many nasty comments and hateful comments. And a lot of the time, I didn't have that many people backing me up. But now, I don't even have to go to the comment section to defend myself because I'm starting to get women and men who will come in and be like, this is why your argument is wrong, and I'm going to reply to it. So if you're a guy in the room and you see someone say something stupid, whether on the internet or in person, don't feel afraid to speak up. I had something happen when I first moved to Seattle, Washington for graduate school. I went to an atheist meetup, a pub meetup, and as I was sitting there, there was a guy across from me. I obviously don't know any of these people, I just moved, and he was holding up his camera or his phone like he was trying to take a picture of me. And so I was kind of like, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm looking up your boob quake photo. If you don't know what boob quake is, also just ask me later. That's not really clear right now. And I'm like, okay, can you stop doing that? It's kind of making me uncomfortable that you're kind of like trying to compare my cleavage. And I was wearing like a sweater at the time. I'm like, what are you doing? And I thought he was trying to take a picture of me. And he just turns to me and he says, well, it's not sexual harassment because it's not a workplace. So he felt like he was okay saying that to me because we were in a bar and getting food while at this atheist meetup. And the worst part was that I was sitting at a table, all guys, there were no other women there at the time, and no one said anything. They all just sat there awkwardly and I left soon after because I'm like, why did I keep sitting here with this guy? And later, I had to give some of them credit. Some of the people emailed me and said they were sorry for not speaking up at the time. They felt bad they hadn't said anything. But this is something that we need to get better about doing. It is super awkward. It's super awkward to call someone out for saying something inappropriate, especially when that person just might not realize it's inappropriate because we have been socialized this way. But if I was just some random person who wasn't really invested in the atheist movement, and this was my first time going to a meetup, I probably would never go back. I would never go back to the atheist movement if that was my first interaction. And so even though it was just one guy in that big group, he ruined the whole group for me by saying that. So because no one spoke up, I felt like that was just the attitude the group had. So that's why it's really important to speak up, because you don't want to make the assholes basically be the representatives of your group. But the main thing you can do is listen to women. Now this the comic says, look kitten, I don't give a damn what you think. If I say I'm a feminist, then by God I am one. Try not to get defensive when someone criticizes you. And I say this because everyone says something wrong sometimes. I've said sexist things, I've said racist things, I've said homophobic things. That doesn't make me a sexist or a racist or homophobic. But everyone screws up. Everyone has these biases in their brain, or you slip up and you didn't think about how what something means. So don't take it personally when someone says, hey, what you said was wrong for this reason. They're not trying to say you're a bad person. They're just trying to alter your behavior for the better. So take it as constructive criticism, not slander against how you are. And a thing to point out is this is listen to women plural, not a woman. Every woman has a different experience. Some people have thicker skin than others. Some people just have different environments than others. So it's really important to just talk to as many women as possible and see how the community affects them. My main message that I want to send women is that we can do it without God. We don't need religion to be empowered. And we need the atheist movement to be as supportive for women so that when they come out of religion, they feel like they can do it without God, that they don't have to have that religious network in order to be a happy person. Thank you.